Hi, everyone, and welcome to Faithin and Lifin with Endometriosis. I'm your host, Rosie. I'm a wife, a mother, entrepreneur, educator, and preacher. But here, I'm a survivor and a woman of faith. And this podcast is a safe place to talk about real conversations about living with endometriosis, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. I'll be talking about my own personal journey with this illness and how Faithin got me through the life in. If you're here, you're probably struggling with endometriosis, searching for answers, or supporting someone who does. And it's okay, you are not alone. 1 in 10 women in the United States have experienced endometriosis, and surprisingly, 3 out of 4 women are often misdiagnosed. So, awareness is super important. This is a place where we are healing through faith, rising through resilience, and sharing our stories so that others can share theirs too. So grab your favorite cup of coffee, let your hair down, and let's do some faithin' through life.
In his shelter, no matter where I turn, this place is in my faith.
So I'm going to take you back to a time when I was 14. The year was 1997. At that time, most girls my age and my culture were preparing for something so important called a quinceañera. A quinceañera is a coming of age party where you are presented to the society in preparation to become a young woman. Everyone around me was getting ready, was excited, picking out dresses, talking to people about being their bridesmaids and groomsmen, and picking out cake, the venue, the food, all of that. It was an exciting time. But for me, it was a very difficult time. As I told you in my previous episode, I started having my period when I was 9 years old. And so endometriosis started right away. Initially, it was not very difficult. Um, I did have painful periods, but everyone said it was normal. However, around the time that I turned 14, it got really bad. The pain was excruciating. There were times I couldn't get out of bed. There were times that even wanting to go to school was a task. And for me, that was difficult because I was a book nerd. I was a band nerd. I was always wanting to go to school, wanting to read, wanting to do my homework, wanting to learn more. So the fact that I had a hard time going to school daunted me. So at around this time, I met this boy. Now, meeting a boy is something normal for most teenagers. For me, it wasn't just about having a relationship with this guy. It was more so that he was a bad boy that sold marijuana. And that was for me a relief for the pain that I was experiencing. Because, mind you, I was going to several doctors and no one had an answer. Everyone said that what I was going through was completely normal, that it was just a part of being a woman, that I was going to be okay, that I should just take pain medication. And I was tired of pain medication after pain medication and nothing relieving the pain. It was unbearable. There were times where I felt like I was burning inside, and I couldn't understand why because everyone said that was normal. I couldn't really understand how something normal had to feel this way. And so when I met this guy, he introduced me to marijuana. Now, in my family, that's not a good thing. My family was very, very conservative, very Catholic. And for me to even want to consider drugs was ginormous. But I was in a place where I didn't know what else to do. So that seemed that seemed like the obvious answer to relieve the pain. And this young man gave me that way. So I began to smoke marijuana. I couldn't tell anybody. I couldn't tell my family about this boy because I wasn't supposed to have a boyfriend. I wasn't supposed to do any drugs. But this was the only way that I could feel okay. It was the only way that I could live my life pain free. Eventually, my family found out about this boy and they were very upset, rightfully so. And I had to stop seeing him and I couldn't do the marijuana anymore. I knew it was wrong, but it was the only way that I could stop having pain. So when that relationship ended, I went back to going to see doctors after doctors after doctors, but none of them had the answer. None of them could help me. None of them could understand why a 14-year-old girl was going through this that seemed to be normal. As I said before, at that time, this was 1997, and endometriosis was new. It was a new illness, and no one really knew much about it. No one really understood it. There were not very many women gynecologists, so all these men were telling me I was fine, and I really wasn't. So it was an ongoing cycle of doctor visits, ER visits, trying one birth control pill, trying another birth control pill, that not working. I'm gaining weight, I'm losing weight because of the birth control pills. I was feeling depressed. It was an ongoing cycle. So, endo doesn't just affect you physically, it affects you in many areas because at that time, no one had the answer. No one could figure out why I was feeling the way I was feeling. So, after some time, I realized that I had to just push through. No one had an answer. My parents thought I was crazy because, as anyone who has an invisible illness understands, no one sees that you're in pain. No one sees that you physically have something. And that invisibility makes it more difficult for people to understand what you're going through. You know, it's really hard to tell someone, I have this pain, I have this burning sensation. I'm not happy in my own body, but yet they see you look fine. And that's the most difficult part of this journey. It took maybe 2 years before I actually got a diagnosis. After that, so my family is very Catholic. So they also believe in what's called curanderismo. Curanderismo is sort of a traditional way of using herbs and, spiritual things. Eh, I know now that it's not a good thing, but at that time, I just wanted a way to get better. So my mother took me to what you call a curandera, who is sort of like a spiritual witch doctor. And she gave me a tea, and then she went proceeded to using some herbs, rubbing my abdomen. That was excruciating. That was worse than the endo pain. But she kept saying that I was going to feel better. And I thought, well, if that's going to make it better, I might as well go through it. It really didn't make it better, though. It made it worse because after that, I was in more pain. My flow, you would think I was a water fountain. And still, nobody understood. Still, everybody expected me to go to school. Everybody expected me to do my chores, especially in a Mexican household. A woman's job is always to do the chores, to keep the house clean. And I couldn't do it. It- I did it, but it was hard. I, sorry. Mm. So after the curandera, which was no help at all, I was more pain than ever. The pain was excruciating. I felt like I was burning between my legs. I couldn't think, I couldn't walk. There were times I couldn't get out of bed. My flow was, you'd think I was a water fountain. It was crazy. And I still did the best. I still, went to school. I went to band practice. I had really good grades. Um, I graduated from high school when I was 16. So I was just still able to do what I needed to do, but it was hard. It was hard because the experts said I was okay, and I knew I wasn't okay, but they never understood. My mother, she was an amazing advocate. She tried her best. She yelled at every doctor because she was frustrated. because she knew I was going through something, but she couldn't understand and she couldn't help. My father, it was hard for him. He, you know, he's a traditional male Mexican, and mm, in my culture, men aren't supposed to show that they're hurt. So even though I knew he was hurt, he didn't really show it. And that made it really hard. But he still expected me to continue. He expected me to do good in school. He expected me to go to work because I would help them in their business. They had a carpet cleaning business at that time, and I helped them with that. So everybody expected me to be okay, but I couldn't be okay. Finally, after so many tries of birth control pills, so many, I mean, my body got immune to painkillers because there was one after the other and none of them were helping. By the time I turned 16, which is when I graduated, I turned to another thing, alcohol. I know that was wrong, but it relieved the pain. And I was living in college as an adult, even though I was 16. So it was relatively easy for me to get alcohol. Everybody was, so happy. It should have been an amazing time. I was living in the dorms, meeting new people, experiencing the college life. But to me, I was just trying to get relief from the pain. We would go to parties, my friends would invite me to parties, and, they'd be happy, they'd be excited. And I would just want to go in a corner and drink a beer so that I could forget this pain, so that I could get back to work and study and be okay. I had I had another boyfriend at that time who I turned away because I didn't know if I would be able to have a family with him. I knew that there was something wrong and I didn't want to have that burden on someone. So I made sure that we didn't continue our relationship because I just didn't, I couldn't be myself. And that was hard. Finally, I'll never forget my last ER visit before diagnosis. I remember that I was tired, that I was frustrated. 2 years of no answers. And I told my mom that regardless of me getting a diagnosis or not, this was going to be the last time I would go to an ER because it wasn't helping. Nobody was giving me answers. And once again, we were told I was fine. They did blood tests, they did a ultrasound, some other test that I don't remember, and they came back and said, "You're okay. You're fine. It's normal. It's a part of, being a woman. It's just normal period pain." And at that moment, I think because of my mother's frustration with seeing me go through this, seeing how much pain I was in, my mom snapped. And she actually slapped the ER director because she said, "I'm tired of you guys saying that she's okay and she's not." And she literally went up to him and slapped him. And she told him, "I'm not leaving this ER until you figure out what's wrong with her." I bet that scared him. So he said, "Well, there's this new 3D ultrasound machine that we just received. So we'll try it and see." Now, I didn't get my hopes up because I knew it didn't matter what machine they had. Everybody was always going to say there was nothing wrong. But I said, "Well, let's give it a shot." So they did the ultrasound machine and he came back and it was a very different diagnosis that I was expecting. They came back and they said I had Meckel's diverticulum. Now, if you don't know what Meckel's diverticulum is, it's where your intestines kind of turn into this ball. And now, mind you, it was a diagnosis and I should have felt relief, but I knew that wasn't it. And then they said that I would have to have surgery, that they would have to remove a part of my intestine. Now, as I said before, at that time, I didn't really have a good relationship with God because everybody who talked to me about faith were the same people who didn't believe that there was something wrong. So in my mind, I thought, is there really a God? The same people who are telling me about God are the same people who say there's nothing wrong. So I don't think there's a God, but I was wrong. And in his infinite mercy, he used that diagnosis to help me. Because then I had a surgery. I had a laparoscopic surgery for the Meckles. And in that laparoscopic surgery, they finally found that I had endometriosis. And it wasn't endometriosis at stage 1 or stage 2, like they expected from a 16-year-old. It was endometriosis at stage 4, a very severe endometriosis. And not only that, I also had adenomyosis and polycystic ovarian syndrome. So finally, I had some answers. And it took Neckel's diverticulum for them to figure out that I had something more. So after that, they came and they said what I had. They ended up doing more than just the small piece of my intestine. They ended up removing all of the endo that I had in my uterus, behind my uterus. Um, Actually, parts were also in my intestine, which is why what they thought was Meckel's was also endo that had gotten onto my intestines. And I was so relieved because finally I had something. Finally, I could say to people, I was right. I am sick. Now, what happens after that is still a long road. And there were still many things that came after because as I said before, endo was new. Doctors didn't really know or understand how to treat it, whether there was a cure or not. And many things happened after that, which I will talk about at the next episode. But for me, it was amazing to just know that finally I was heard. Finally, I had a diagnosis and I could start to tell people that what I had was real. And for anyone else who is struggling with endo, I want to tell you this: advocate for yourself. It doesn't matter what the doctors are telling you. You know your body and you know if something is wrong. So if you have to go to 20 different doctors to find out what's wrong with your body, do it. I'm glad that I had my mother who advocated for me, but I know there are many who don't have someone to advocate for them. And from what I understand from endo, I was a very rare case because most people don't discover any symptoms or even a diagnosis until they're a lot older. So if you are a mother and you have a daughter who's going through puberty and who tells you that her pain doesn't feel normal for a period, please listen. Advocate for her. Find her some answers. And if you're a woman who feels like your pain is not normal, fight for answers. Because this illness is real. It doesn't matter if you look sick. This illness is real. Thank you for being here with me today. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it, subscribe to my channel, and like it. I'd also love for you to go on Amazon and grab a copy of my book. It's called Breaking the Silence, My Endometriosis Story. I will soon be coming out with another book that will talk about the other things that come along with endometriosis. But for now, thank you for being with me. Make sure that you follow me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify. Faithin and Lifin with endometriosis, and I will see you next time.